Well, hello everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for this very exciting conversation. My name is Josue Perea. I am glad to represent the Afro-Latina, Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina Forum, which is a nonprofit based out of New York City, but really located all throughout the country, which focuses on centering Blackness within Latinidad. And we advance the visibility of Black Latinidad by encouraging certain conversations in spaces like this one. So I want to thank you all for being here in attendance for this exciting conversation on the book Boat People, which is a wonderful book by Mayra Santos-Febres, who is going to be able to talk about it, which was translated by Vanessa Pérez-Rosario. And so I'll read their bio in a little bit. Before we do that, we want to say that all of our programming is provided also in Spanish. Nuestro programa completo está proveído en español. Si va a la parte del menú, if you go to the menu part um, and you click interpretation, your interpretación, you'll see there the option to hear the entire conversation in Spanish para poder escuchar toda la conversación en español. Ahí tenemos a Tamara Isaac, our interpreter, who will be there helping us out through this entire day. Tamara has interpreted a lot of our events, and we're really thankful for her presence. Entonces, para los que quieran, pueden oprimir la página, pueden oprimir el botón que dice interpretación, the button that says interpretation, and click Spanish. Aunque, as we know, for any Afro-Latino event, como sabemos para eventos Afro-Latinos, they're always bilingual, they're always Spanglish, siempre son en Spanglish. Entonces, we'll try to do the best to keep it there. Um, and so we're excited about that. And I want to highlight and shout out some of the people, some of the groups who helped us partner this. We have La Casa de Las Américas at La Guardia Community College, who is represented here by Ryan Hamilton, who's also the chairperson of the Afro-Latina Forum. We also have Small Axe Project, which is represented here, of course, by Vanessa Pérez-Rosario. Of course, el Proyecto de Afrodescendencia y Racialización de la Universidad de Puerto Rico, along with Cumbre Internacional Afrodescendiente, represented, of course, by Mayra Santos-Febres and others who are joining from that. I'm very excited that for this event, we were again able to partner with a local bookstore called Café con Libros, local meaning that is local in New York City, but also local to the Afro-Latinx community. Café con Libros is an intersectional feminist bookstore where we recommend everyone to purchase their books from, and they carry Boat People in their store. And so they were happy to join this conversation and celebrate Boat People with all of us here. And thank you for Kalima de Sus as the entrepreneur and leader of Café con Libros, Afro-Latinx, feminist, queer, intersectional bookstore in the heart of Brooklyn, but for all the world. And last and definitely not least, the Center for the Humanities at the CUNY Graduate Center of the City University of New York for their great support and promotion of the event. And also Cardboard House Press, which published Boat People and has really been a catalyst for making sure that this book is out. As you have seen when we were loading this conversation, Boat People received an honorable mention award from the International Latino Book Awards, which Vanessa and Mayra will discuss a little bit more. So the celebration of this book is a really great time for us to really start to talk about ways in which we discuss Blackness. And Boat People is a really important book. You'll learn more about the book in a little bit. But as I read the book, I had told Mayra when we connected on this event that the book has a lot of really interesting themes of immigration and belonging, themes of the Middle Passage, or Ma'afa, right, as we call it, a lot of us in the diaspora. And so it's a really important book. And Mayra and Vanessa will get more into it as they discuss, but it's also a poetry collection, but also one long poem that really reveals a lot of aspects of often under-discussed aspects of the African diaspora and of Afro-Latinidad and Afro-Caribbean identity. And I think it's a really important addition into the large corpus of Afro-Puerto Rican and Afro-Caribbean poetry and literature. And so we're really excited to be able to have this event together. And and in order to lead us in this event, we're going to have two people that I'm really excited are going to lead this conversation. First, of course, is Mayra Santos-Febres. Mayra Santos-Febres was born in Carolina, Puerto Rico. She studied literature at the University of Puerto Rico and a PhD at Cornell University. She has been a visiting scholar at Rutgers, Cornell, Harvard, as well as the Complutense University in Spain, the Autonomous University of Mexico at Yucatan campus, and Leipzig University in Holland. She co-created the creative writing program for the University of Puerto Rico and founded and directed the Word Festival de la Palabra, which is an amazing festival, the most internationally recognized festival in Puerto Rico. She's the content coordinator of Interdisciplinary Multicultural Institute at the UPR. Mayra Santos-Febres is currently the principal investigator for the development of the University of Puerto Rico's Afro-Diasporic and Race Studies program, which has been recently awarded a Mellon Foundation grant for academic diversification, and 2 years ago co-founded and began La Cumbre Internacional Afrodescendiente, which has sought to bring together people of African descent from all over the continent. So thank you, Mayra, for your wonderful scholarship. And she's joined today by Vanessa Pérez-Rosario. Vanessa Pérez-Rosario is a translator and professor of English at Queens College and a professor of Latin American, Iberian, and Latino cultures at the CUNY Graduate Center. She is the author of Becoming Julia de Burgos, The Making of a Puerto Rican Icon, published in Spanish as Julia de Burgos, La Creación de un Ícono Puertorriqueño, which is a finalist for the International Latino Book Award of this year, 2023. She's editor of Hispanic Caribbean Literature of Migration, Narratives of Displacement, and translator of Boat People, the book we're celebrating today, which received an honorable mention at the International Latino Book Awards. She's currently working on a bilingual critical edition titled I Am My Own Path, The Writings of Julia de Burgos, which is slated to come out in 2024 from University of Texas Press. She's the managing editor of Small Acts, a Caribbean journal of criticism. We're happy to be joined by Vanessa tonight. So we're excited for this conversation and we're thankful for Vanessa and Mayra. And now, please take it away.
Wonderful.
Vanessa.
Yay. So exciting to be here. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and for organizing this event, Josue, and all of everyone at the Afro-Latinx Forum and all of the other sponsors. Thank you. I'm especially grateful to Cardboard House Press and Giancarlo Wipaya and Charlotte Whittle, our editors there, who have just been wonderful to work with. And as Josue mentioned, we're here tonight to celebrate Boat People and celebrate that Boat People has received an honorable mention from the International Latino Book Award in the category of Best Bilingual Poetry Collection. So it's very exciting, and I had the opportunity to be in conversation with Mayra about this book when it first came out, and I'm excited to now revisit that conversation and we have a little more time this time, I think, than we did last time. So I'm excited about that. This is an amazing collection of poetry. I was really taken with it when I first read it in Spanish and started tinkering with it and translating lines here and there, and then was moved to translate the entire collection. It's a short, it's made up of 20 poems, and many of them are kind of short, very imagistic poems, and it sort of leads up to this final poem, as Josue was saying, about immigration in the Caribbean. It's primarily about, the references in these poems to the Dominican Republic, to Cuba, but also Haiti, and of course, we know that undocumented migration in the Caribbean happens across the Caribbean. It's not just the Dominican Republic, it's not just the Hispanophone Caribbean. It happens across the Caribbean. So we're going to read, or Mayra's going to read some poems to get us started. But before we do that, I don't know if you want to say something more about the collection. Josue and I have given a bit of an introduction for those who haven't read the book. But is there something more that you want to say before, just kind of general, before you read a couple of poems, and then we'll get into deeper themes?
Pues buenas noches a todas, a todos y a todes desde acá, desde el Caribe. I'm really glad and happy to be celebrating this poem and this poetry collection. I just wanted to tell a little bit of a story of the story behind the book. You know, when I was younger, I'm not that old. One day I was just flipping through the paper and the newspaper in Puerto Rico, and I saw this big photograph of 9 people that were crossing from the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico, and they were they drowned, and the sea washed them to the shore of Isla de Mona. And then I couldn't get that picture out of my mind. There were a couple of Haitians and some Dominican people from the Dominican Republic. And I've always been carrying that picture of those bodies, you know, in my washed out shore in my head. And all of a sudden that picture took me back to a memory that we all have, but we don't have it as a personal memory, but as a collective memory, which is all those people that were drowned or pushed ashore through the Middle Passage. And I figured out finally that we were made, that there's a city under the sea that is completely inhabited by all of our ancestors, the ancestor that came through the Middle Passage, all of those naufragios, all of those shipwrecks and accidents that happened at sea, battles that happened at sea, all the people in, you know, all of those pobladores originarios, you know, the Arawaks also that fled from the Spanish colonization, you know, through the sea, and we have to think of the Caribbean not in terms, you know, I'm determined to say this whenever I can. We have to think of the Caribbean and its diasporas and the Afro-Latinos and our diasporas as connected, not in terms of nation only, but also of that humongous nation under the sea, that our bodies and our histories have formed. And how is that connected to all the migrations that constitute us, not only to Africa, which also, you know, is one of the most important ones, but also of all those people that were sold into slavery from the Canary Islands. You know, there were people sold into slavery from the Canary Islands. It was thought of as people from Africa, you know, not Spaniards, although they are not evidently Black. And all the ways in which racialization turned us into less than people. O sea, las razas no existen, pero la racialización sí, y es una manera de deshumanizar, to dehumanize people in order to turn them into cargo. So this book reflects on that photograph, and that's why it kind of put words into photographs. And it always says the word indocumentado. Indocumentado 1, indocumentado 2, indocumentado 3, because these people, us, you know, we had no names for a long time. Our names and our identity was stolen from us, and our memories of how complex and rich is our Constitution. And I just wanted to say that this book came out of that esa reflexión, no, that thinking process. One photograph that took me way back to an image that I couldn't think of it as my own, but I knew it was reflected in what we are today. You know, we still are diasporic people. We have to run for our lives. We have to run to other places in order to eat, to look for a better future. And that is part of what has always constituted us. So to think about us in terms of only nationalities, Colombian, Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, Cuban, is just like the tip of the iceberg of what we really, really are.
Yeah, wonderful. And if you know, for those of you who have not read the book, when you read it, you will have that, you'll get that sense, right? You'll get that sense from reading these. They're very imagistic poems. They have a lot of imagery to them. They're like snapshots when you read these, each poem, and then it builds to this longer poem, the longest poem of the collection that's at the end. You brought up a lot in.
Do you want me to read one poem so that
Yeah, I was going to say you brought up a lot that we can talk about, but maybe it would be helpful at this point to have the audience hear a little bit of what the poems sound like, and then we can go back to discussing some of those themes that you raised.
Well, let me put me my ojos. So, tienen que pensar ahora el 4.
Okay.
Tienen que pensar ahora en bachata. You know, we opened with salsa, which is one of our diasporic music, classical music. So let's now go to bachata. Sounds like this. Ay, sí, mi morenita, véndeme tu carne por un beso, por un papel que diga que naciste, véndeme tus profundidades de molusco, tus cositas saladas, véndemelas, para la grasa de los griles que te esperan, para los mapos que van secando el mar de las casas como tumbas, el mármol, morenita, y los pelos recortados y pintados de firefighter red, el arrullo de los helicópteros en medio del mar, véndemelo todo en esa carne tan tuya, tan cebo de tiburones, tan tigra, tu carne desvelada en el fondo de las costas, de las embarcaciones que te traen hasta el estacionamiento donde te compro.
Beautiful.
Now it's your turn.
Should I read it in English? Yeah. Oh yes, my morenita, sell me your body for a kiss, for a paper that says you were born. Sell me your mollusks deep, your salty little things. Sell them to me for the grease on the grills that await you, for mops drying the sea from the houses like tombs of marble, morenita, hair coiffed and painted firefighter red, helicopters humming at high sea. Sell it all to me, that body so yours, so shark sweat, so tigra, your body sleepless at the base of the vessel transporting you seaboard to the wharf where I buy you. That's a perfect example of how you start with the present and then take us all the way back, right? Centuries. So that we end that final image, we're at a dock somewhere where people are being sold into slavery. Yeah.
And I think that is exactly what is happening and has been happening for, I don't think that slavery has ended. It's just changed the name. You know, there's a lot of human trafficking going on. And now in the post-COVID world that we are still trying to figure out how it goes. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty confused about this post-COVID world.
Yeah.
One of the things that has just me ha encogido el pecho, you know, it just makes my chest go filled with pain sometimes, is when I think about what's happening to our Haitian brothers and sisters and how, you know, sometimes they have to jump into a boat to get to Mexico so that they then go to Coyotes to go to the border or try to go to Chile. What's happening with
Venezuela, I mean,
Venezuela, anywhere in order to have something to eat.
Yeah.
And the same with Cuba and Nicaragua, you know. So there's a whole lot of human trafficking going on right now after the COVID pandemic, and it makes you think of how migration is and exile and you know, and selling yourself or being sold is still one of the most important constituencies of our being as Latinos and Afro-Latinos. The fight for the territory and expropriation and having to jump into the sea or wherever in order to go to a place where there's a better chance to be alive.
So the institution has changed, but a lot of the same, there's still these difficult experiences, right? The challenges are still ongoing.
Yes.
They have not been overcome.
Nope.
Yeah. Let's see, there's a lot that you brought up, and I wonder if maybe a place to start doesn't come up so much in this particular poem that you read just now, but one of the images that captured me and also challenged me when I was translating was the city of the dead. Right, that city, well, I call it the city of the dead, but at the bottom of the sea. Yeah. I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit more.
Yes, well, in many places in Afro-Latin America and in the Caribbean, there is a very strong experience. And it is a spiritual and it is an ontological experience of remembering our ancestors. You know, we call them los muertos, no? In spiritualism, espiritismo, you talk about having a muerto, which is not, it's just an energy of somebody who has passed to another instance of energy, and is there either to protect you or to bring you mischief. And that and ancestry is really important for us. You know, you walk down the street, any street of the Caribbean, and the first thing that somebody will, you know, look at you and read your face and say, tú eres la nieta de Clemencia, o tú eres la hija de Juan Santo, o mira, yo estudié con tu tío. You know, people can read. I don't think it's your face. I think it's even more. It's your energy. And in places small, in communities so tight as the ones that are in the Caribbean, we still go through that experience that breaks times in two, the present and the past, and they're always together. You know, in Santeria, we call that Iyetunde or Babatunde. You know, your father has returned or your mother has returned, and there's an ontologic saying that explains this very well, which is that, you know, when you're doing your prayers in the morning, o mi tuto, aguatuto, tutolaroye, you say, I salute the blood in my body and the ancestors that are present. You know, saludo a la sangre de mis ancestros, sobre cuyos hombros yo me levanto. And my dog is getting crazy. I'm sorry if the barking bothers, but you can hear it?
I can hear it. I don't know if others can hear it, but I can hear it.
I'm sorry, but one of the things—
No, it doesn't bother me at all.
I'm trying, I think I'm gonna throw him through the balcony. But one of the things that is important is that your ancestors and your memory are always with you. So that is something that is always with me. That idea that our present is always connected to the past. And that city of the dead, esa ciudad de los ancestros, is the one that is always reminding us that the past is there, that it hasn't been resolved, that we still have a lot to do in order to bring justice and in order to bring equity and inclusion and that we have always been people of many ethnies, of many ethnicities that have merged together. So that there's always, and this is something that I really want to propose, because if we talk about the way in which racism manifests, and also the way in which alliances manifest in the Caribbean and in many places in Afro-Latino America, it's different in every country, you know. In our place, it has a lot to do with that multi-ethnic composition of Blackness, for instance, or of the Afro-Latino-ness or Latinx identity. We're all so mixed. And I'm not thinking only in terms of races. I'm talking about ethnicities, you know. There were Fulas, there were Bambaras, there were Bantus, there was Gallegos, there were Canarians, there were Taínos, Arawaks, Nasa, Quechua, all of that, you know, being mixed together into this other identity that has been thought of, you know, as, you know, racial democracy, which is not true. There's always been tensions and racism in our places, but there's always a lot of love, also a lot of love and alliances and connections that are multi-ethnic and also cross-cultural and cross-national. So that City of the Dead is everywhere. Everybody's there, you know. And there is, I think there is a proposal of a definition of Latinidad desde abajo del mar, la raíz más profunda of that ancestry that composes us.
Yeah. So for our members of the audience who've not yet read the book, you'll see as you read it, when you get your when you get your copy, you'll see that there's that this image of the City of the Dead at the bottom of the sea is one that recurs in many of the poems. It's an important image. So that's an important topic that we've just discussed. It's very important for the book too. It slipped my mind, but so many things that we could talk about. Another question that I have for you regarding well, maybe an easier question. I don't know. One of the things that people often said to me was, oh, I saw your book at such and such books. I saw your translation of Mayra's poems at XYZ bookstore in Puerto Rico. It must have been your translation or somebody else's translation because the title's in English. Boat people. I said, it's not necessarily. As far as I know, this is the only translation, but the title was written in English.
See.
The title of the book, the original book, it's not something that we've really said here, I don't think yet, but the book was originally written and published in 2004. Is that right?
That's right.
So it's almost 20 years ago. So maybe you could talk about that, both of those things, the title being in English. And I think I would like us to talk a little bit about, the book is now almost 20 years old, and yet it's so present and so compelling still today, which is the mark of great literature anyway, right? But yeah, I don't know if you want to say something about that choice of the title in English, even though the poems were written in Spanish.
Well, I think it came that is the category that the U.S. Coast Guards, at least when I hear it in Puerto Rico, talks about indocumentados. We call them yoleros or barceros. They come in yolas or barza or balsas. But the U.S. Coast Guard, remember, Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States, so we have the Coast Guards, and sometimes it's the Coast Guards, the people that have first, intervene with with the people that are trying to get to Puerto Rico, and they call them boat people. So I wanted to use that because it's a generic, you know, we're all the same. Here we are in Latin America calling ourselves Colombians and Venezuelans and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, but the official lingo to talk about migration in the Caribbean is boat people. Those boat people that came, you know, either they came from balsas in Cuba, or yolas in the Dominican Republic, or pateras in La Peña de Gibraltar. They're called many ways, but again, there's the ship, you know, and also that ship that is always taking us from our motherlands to other places. Either we're escaping or they're taking us there. So that idea of both people it just resonated with me as the perfect title that I was looking for, because in our communities, we call it in very different ways, but the experience hasn't changed a bit. And that is why it's so painful sometimes. And you reminded me, you know, that it was, 20 years ago. I didn't even notice that this book when I was like 30 years old. And now it seems as if I have written it yesterday. And it has a lot to do also with how systemic racism and global racism works, which is to freeze time for a certain amount of people. There is this idea of modernity, and modernity is this model that says that you go from primitivism to civilization.
Linear.
It's very linear. From poverty to, to success and to be a good citizen, and from subalterity, which means that you cannot speak for yourself, into, public speech. You become a person that can enunciate, that can give palabras to yourself and take the public speech. But for some people, that is the model, not for us. It's the aspiration of everyone, but it is not the access that all of us has. Women, people with género disidentes or non-binary, racialized people, immigrants. And if you combine all of that, you're absolutely outside of time in that model of modernity. And I wanted to talk about that too, because very seldom people think about the way racism or coloniality has also colonized time. Time in that lineal, productive, progressive way has been colonized or organized by this discourse. And there's some people that live outside of time. That's why I always try to write things that are very complicated, very not difficult to talk about. In this book, there's not one word that is not simple and colloquial, but I try to pack in a lot of information so that we can think deeply about our condition, not just surface. I don't like the poems that talk about surface Blackness. I know this is controversial to say, but I don't think that the color makes it. It is way deeper than that. And we have to be aware. Color and the body is the portal of consciousness, accepting yourself and looking at yourself and trying to get out of your face and of your body, all those ugly lies that they told us that we're ugly, that we are buenos para nada, vagos, whatever. You have to take it out. Then after you take that out, the body becomes a portal of consciousness. You don't transcend the body, you go inside, and all of a sudden you remember all those things and violence and histories and all that. And that is what constitutes race and identity through time. and it is maybe it hurts, but it is incredibly magical. You know, I live for those moments in which I can go that deep. I'm talking to my son, you know, that now is applying for college. I always go, Lucian, go deep. You are capable. Go deep. You're a deep thinker. Go deep. And I think that, you know, sometimes we have to fight for survival so damn hard that we don't have the time to think deeply into what comes to us. And it is important that we do that we can take some time, steal some time from modernity and go deep, and then understand that our organization of self and ontology and the world is very, very deep and rich, and it can constitute a model of what people there call Afrofuturism. I think that we have the potential to propose a model of what the future can be, which is post-racial. But it is through going, you know, going and atravesar, to go right inside what raciality and racialization has made us. It is, that's what I think. Wow. I think I said something important because
I think so.
you know, I can feel my ancestors talking through me.
That was very deep. But you know, one of the things that I think that you do so well in the collection is you get the sense of that disruption of linear time. I mean, absolutely, that's something that you feel as you read it. The City of the Dead is one example of that, right? Something that's outside of time, outside of linear time. And there are other images, the sea, you know, there are lots of images that produce that sense that you're outside of linear time. But I want to go back to something you just said about the language. It's true that your language is in many ways colloquial in the poems. There's a lot of that, but there's some hard words. I mean, I had to pull out my dictionary when I was trying to translate, particularly like two things that kind of stumped me a bit. The biology, right? There are a lot of references to biological body parts, but you use biological terms that I didn't know. I had to look some of them up. And then there are lots of Greek references too. Perseus, Aeolian. And I wonder if you could talk about both of those things, not together necessarily, but maybe the reference of the Mediterranean. I don't know if they were meant to be references to the Mediterranean. Yeah.
You know, the thing is that one of my favorite poets, I have to say, is one of them is Edward Brathwaite, and another one is oh my God, this guy who wrote it's not the Black Atlantis, is he won a Nobel Prize.
Derek Walcott?
Remember? Yes, Derek Walcott.
Derek Walcott, yes. Who, of course, yes. Well, yeah, there. Omaris. Yeah.
Yeah. How can you not read Derek Walcott if you're from the Caribbean? And he always said that the Caribbean was our, you know, birth of the civilization, and that it was compared to the Greek islands where the myth of the Occidental culture was born, you know. Of course, the Greeks were not Greeks. They did not think of themselves as European. They were thinking themselves in terms of, you know, Mediterranean and Turkish and Phoenician cultures. But all of a sudden, Europe came and took Greece and put it, you know, like the cradle of European civilization. So I couldn't, and I'm glad that you tell me this, because I could not do it. I tried to clean myself of Derek Walcott's poetry, but it was impossible for me, because I do think that the birth of the Americas was us in the Caribbean. I mean, it all started in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. All of it, you know, it was the first. La Española was the first place where slaves were sold, and the first place of the genocide was La Española, and Haiti was the birth of the Caribbean and Latin American independence. You know, that was the first colony in which Black people dared to dream of freedom, and they're still paying for it. But it all started there. And that's why I talk about Aeolian and all that. But I also always, not in this book, but this book led me, you know, even further, deeper. And it was the first moment in which I started thinking of that other world that inhabited in our bodies and also in our memories. And that's why I make so much reference about the body. See, I think that for people who have been marginalized, or what Achille Mbembe in Necropolis says, you know, they have been declared as socially dead, you know, the social death of, he says, Blackness, you know, but we can also think of the social death of people who are género disidentes, that are not non-binary, that are making this incredible fight in order to open the ways in which we think of ourselves as man or woman, and in which way we portray that difference, because also, you know, genders do not exist in the way that we think of them. I try to think about the ways in which our bodies are the recipients of identity, you know, and that's why I talk about alveolos and dedos and pipí, huellas digitales,
cells,
hairs and mouths, and how does the, you know, when you're in the sea, how does fish and bacteria all of a sudden live in that body that is pseudo dead, has always been dead, in terms of the way it has been conceived. So the corporality of race is sometimes so heavy, you know, because you cannot escape, and you should not escape your body. Your body is sacred. But so society makes it so hard for you to live in your body, because it becomes such a metaphor for what your life should be, because of the color of your skin, or the texture of your hair, or what you have under your skirt or your pants or whatever. You know, it makes it so hard because it's so packed with social definitions. So that is important in this book, because I go again to that snapshot of those 9 bodies, dead bodies in that shore of La Mona. And also there is, I don't know if you know of this wonderful Dominican poet called Frank Baez. He has a group called Los Hombrecitos, and they with Humberto Pumarol, and they always sing a song that it's a poem, because what they do is like rock with spoken word, and it's absolutely majestic what they do. And they have a poem that says, todos tienen un primo en el canal de la Mona. Todos tienen un primo en el canal de la Mona. You know? And I love that performance, you know, musical poetry proposal that they do, because it's true. All of us have a member of the family in the bottom of the sea. We are connected. we are. And the body and the experience of migration is what connects us, I think.
I don't know if I told you this, that what attracted me to the collection of poetry, it's a wonderful collection, it's moving, it's powerful. I agree with you that it does have a very colloquial tone, although yes, there are words here and there that are challenging. But you know, I grew up in Mayagüez, and I used to see, when I was a child, I would see photos in the newspaper or barceros, and my father would tell me, and I was very, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, so I didn't understand what was happening. He would explain it to me, and I was completely confused by it, because I couldn't imagine, you know, that somebody would cross the sea on a balsa. And that those images were so powerful, they stuck with me. So when I picked up your book, it took me back to that, to my childhood, but also, you know, to those memories of growing up in Mayagüez and going to Boquerón was a beach that I went to mostly, but seeing the Isla Mona not far.
And also seeing washes, you know, the ways to wash un mahón, una camisa, unos zapatos, and all of a sudden you could see, and people will see. And there's a lot of people in Mayagüez that have told me that they have helped indocumentados into their fincas, not only the trafficking, the people that are trafficking, that are profiting from it, but also people that helped and grew up helping. Balseros and indocumentados and hiding them, like they would hide in the 17th century and in the 18th century and the 19th century. They would hide cimarrones that were escaping from las haciendas. It's amazing, you know. Sometimes I think that we need more books that talk about these experiences. And to tell you the truth, the reason why I wrote this book is because I was waiting to read a book about this and I couldn't find it. And I why don't we talk about these things? Why do we keep trying to write poetry about self-knowledge and melancholy? And why do we write this, you know, the failure of our dream of being modern, as if it was a problem of our making? You know, modernity is a myth, and it's a way to colonize our minds and our territory and our bodies, and that's what it is. So why do we keep writing about it with such an, you know, as if we were Joseph Conrad? Oh, the horror, the horror. We are still the savages, and no, I'm no savage. Why do we keep writing about this? So this is a cry for other people to join us in writing about these other things. Yuderquisa Espinosa, one of my favorite, you know, decolonial Afrofeminists, talks about this, and a friend, una comay mía, it's una hermana. She talks about this as the genealogy of experience, and I think that is what I did, you know, or I tried to do in both people and many things that I write, which is create a genealogy of our experience, but from our very complex point of view. We really need the books we deserve. Sometimes I don't read them.
Yeah, I've never read, I mean, it's part of what's so impactful about the book. I'd never read a book about this before. A collection of poetry. I've never seen a collection of poetry on this topic before. I think of these poems, I've told you this before, but I think of these poems as elegies. And I wonder if you think about genre in that way when you're writing.
Yes,
That
there
was
is.
kind of a writerly question, but I'm just curious.
Well, the thing is that, déjame ver. There's so many of our experiences and our great thinkers and writers that have been invisibilized, that yes, I do eulogies, but also what I write is closer to an African Yoruba tradition called Orikis. Oriki is a wonderful, and Moyubas, you know. Oriki is what you do, okay, Santeria 101. The first thing, the most sacred thing is first your muertos, your ancestors, and then it's your head, your consciousness. A lot of people don't know that this is a very, it's a psycho-religious practice in order to create Iwapele, which is good character. What you do in Santeria is to build your character, your resilience. And the first thing that you do is you praise your own head. Oriki is also a poem of praise to your consciousness and your name and your destiny. So what I try to do is Orikis. I didn't know that. I had to study for a long time in order to understand and say, oh my God, this is what I'm doing, because it's not quite eulogies or odes, but they're very similar. But also in this other tradition, really what you are doing is calling consciousness. Every time you write or you sing, you're calling back your consciousness, that your expanded vision of life and connection. So yes, that's what I do. I do oriquises and I do moyugbas, that are also odes and eulogies. Because it's funny. I mean, we talk about all the ways in which we're different, but actually the human race always doing the same things, which is to talk about all these nameless people that have done incredibly heroic things, like crossing the sea in order to do slave work, to wipe some old people's ass so that they can get money back to your house and give your kids a better future, or and sustain family. You know, that is incredibly heroic. That is, for me, that's all. It just me sobrecoge. How valientes, how incredibly amazing those people, nameless people, indocumentado 1, 2, 3, 4, what is it that they do in order to make things better for the people that are left behind in the island. So that's definitely one of the things that I do. Can I read another poem? Because we're
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to say, maybe it's a good time to listen to another.
Let me see. No, I'm gonna read one with undocumentado so that people can see.
¿Qué número?
El número, yo creo que es 5. Sí, el 5. Indocumentado 4. Con un cuadro de prócer en la balsa se tira al mar. En la java lleva agua, lamparita de pilas, un hambre que va para 100 años y cuerpo que la resiste. En la java lleva una rabia vieja sin nombre y sin culpables, tantos son que se le olvidan. Mareada indumentaria del azul. Un haz de tiburones a la saga le muerde ese sueño tan lejano. Su carne percudida en sal le asegura que jamás se pondrá viejo. Todo tiempo se detiene en medio del mar. Indocumentado 4 teme jamás arrugarse. Mete la cabeza entre las aguas. Lleva el presentimiento de una costa y el susto de sus guardianes. Allá, los ojos de onda corta transistores de barnículos de cal, los ojos desorbitados para rayos, creen que ven una franja verde y firme, donde un pie al fin puede hacerse de su senda. Pero no, es tanto el mar. Indocumentado 4 se seca lentamente el espejismo y las gotas de sal que le van aguando.
Beautiful.
Yes.
My turn?
Yep.
Undocumented 4. Undocumented 4, with a picture of a national hero in the raft. He plunges into the sea. In a sack, he brings water, a battery-powered flashlight, a hunger that stretches 100 years, and a body that fights it. In the sack, he harbors an old rage, nameless, without culprits, so many he can't recall, dressed in dizzying blues. A pack of sharks in pursuit, not his ever-distant dream. His salt-corroded body assures him he'll never grow old. Time stands still at high sea. Undocumented 4 fears he'll never wrinkle, dips his head into the waters, haunted by the premonition of a shore and the fright of its guardians. There, shortwave eyes, transistors of calciferous barnacles, disoriented like lightning rods. The eyes think they see a firm green strip where a foot can finally make its way. But no, there is so much sea. Undocumented 4 slowly dries himself of the mirage, and the salt drops dilute his returns.
You did it beautifully. What I like about your translation is that it flows, it takes the rhythm. And, you know, there is this wonderful poet called Bonafides Rojas that he always, we always talk about the rhythm of the verse, you know, and he always insists, follow your breath, you know, the way in which you breathe will tell you when the verse needs to be cut. And you got that when you did your translation. Why did you do that? How did you do this? Because, you know, the words are the words, but the rhythm is
I don't know exactly, except that I would say that I read them out loud over and over and over again. I read them out loud and then I would change. I mean, I changed. It was an interesting process because initially I translated everything and then I thought, this doesn't work. Like, I can't translate Morenita. I can't translate it, right? And then there were other things like tigra, and there are other, you know, those words can't be translated. They require an explanation to be translated into English. There's no one word, right? It would require a phrase or something like that. So then I translated everything first, and then I started reading them out loud and changing things. And that's how. But I paced around the house, reading them out loud and changing things and translating things and changing things back into Spanish. And then for things that I wanted to keep in English, like, I don't know, I think was it níspero? I don't remember which word it is right now, but there were some words that I looked for words in like Jamaican English and English from other parts of the Caribbean. So I tried to keep some of that. I figured if we're going to translate it into English, it has to be Caribbean English.
And yes, because there is a specificity in our Spanishes, you know, like java is how the Cubans talk about bolsa, and balsa is not the same as yola, but it is
yola, right?
The specific. I try to respect each of the specificity of the Caribbean because I think that our identity as Afro-Latinos and Afro-Caribbean is fractal. Is the one, el uno múltiple, you know, we're one, but we're multiple, and that there is no contradiction between those two. And that is another way of thinking about our identities as Afro-Latinos and as Latinos. We're one, but we're multiple. We can be indigenous, we can be Black, we can be criollo mestizos, we can be of all the colors and all the, but we're one and we're multiple. And those things do not have to be contradictory. That's the beauty of it. That is the fact that it is infinite. The possibilities of mixtures each year, each moment grow and grow and grow. And there are Cubans of Chinese descent and Brazilians that are half Japanese and Iranian, and the world is here. This is one of the most global places in the world, and yet we insist in trying to flatten all that out.
Right, again, yeah.
Put it in little boxes, and that's how French people think. That's not how we think. and I think that we have to do these things of trying to understand us in such a complex and multiple but yet connected way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I mean, just to give, of course, I have to give one little plug to the Small X project, but that's partly what we try to do too, which is very complicated because we want to move beyond linguistic. I mean, there's us as you're saying, one but multiple within the Hispanophone world, but it goes, for us, it goes beyond that to across the Caribbean, right? To think across the Caribbean and the multiple languages. One of the things that I like a lot about the poem, the poemario, is that you bring in a lot of the multilingualism of the Caribbean. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We have that those resonances there from across the Caribbean, which it just goes back to another way of reinforcing your point that we're one. We need to speak to each other, right? We need to be having these conversations across the Caribbean.
Yes. Well, I want to tell you that this book has, and then I would love to hear from the
audience
any question, but this book has really, the fact that you translated it, I have forgotten. I have, I'm sorry, but I write so much that I try not to publish as much as I did before. But I've forgotten about how beautiful this book is, and then your translation
makes really beautiful.
Go back to it, but also to go again and think, where can I go further? And now I'm writing something about us in terms of marronage, of cimarronaje and malungaje, and I'm writing about La Casa del Chontaduro that I visited in Cali, and I'm talking about Villamella and also in Mayagüez, and I'm revisiting all these stories about escaped enslaved people and the quilombos and palenques that they formed all over the place, free places of freedom within la trata esclavista, like hundreds and hundreds of people that lived free within la trata. And I am thinking about that. So thank you, and thanks por revivir este sueño y este libro, because I needed to go.
Powerful book.
Yes, it is.
It is. It's a very powerful book.
Who wrote it? But I know I'm grateful that it was through me.
Yeah, and it's it's as you say, that there's that sort of colloquial language to it, but it's very powerful. There's so much more that we could talk about. You just brought up cimarronaje. We haven't had a chance to talk about that, but I do think we should turn it to the audience.
Yes.
There'll be other moments for more conversations, but I think we should turn to the audience. Are there questions?
Claudia has something here that says, about La Rabia Vieja and the City of the Dead, also about your historical novel, Nuestra Señora de la Noche, and in general about your work deals with the past and its materiality. It's true. But then you were surprised that I talked about Afrofuturism. Well, what is my take in Afrofuturism? Yes, you know, the thing is that I'm very jealous of a book, a wonderful book, written by Rita Indiana, which is La Mucama de Omikunle. La Mucama de Omikunle, I think, is a masterpiece. And that is a Caribbean futurism. You know, Rita Indiana did that. And Rita Indiana, you know, she's married to a Puerto Rican woman, Noelia Quintero, and they're very good friends of mine. And I have been friends with Rita Indiana since, you know, since we were kids. And I think that we need to try to decolonize the way in which we look at the future, and that we have to write about the future. What is the future we envision? Because I'm sick of this Armageddon thing, apocalypse now thing, and you know, it's all gonna be destroyed, and it's colonialism and superiority and violence all over again and again and again and again. So I'm thinking about, what would it, how do we imagine the future? How do we as Caribbeans and Afro-Latinos and Latinos and how, what could the future be? And one thing I really, really would love is that people would you know, this thing about the genetics, that you could imagine if we could remember the memories of our ancestors, but way back before La Trata, and then bring it back to the future. If it is a mixture with memory and technology, how could we do it? And I am a declared optimist. I am not a Black pessimist. I am not a pessimist, period, you know, because I'm alive. And I know that a lot of people died and rindió su energía para que yo estuviera aquí, and that has to continue now, so the road that we have to walk. So yes, I am thinking about Caribbean and Afro-Latino futurism, but in a very positive take, and let's see what happens. I'm experimenting with that now, and definitely it has to take, for me, it has to think again, history and memory, but the things that we haven't talked about, like cimarronaje, and bring it to the forefront and see if that could be can give us the opportunity to make a change of narrative. So yes, Laura, I'm thinking about futurism. And Boricua futurism, I don't know. But Maroon futurism, in which territories and nationalities are merged into a different thing, yes. I don't like nations so much nowadays. I don't like them. I'm sorry. It wasn't a good plan. Then we'll talk about that. Is there any other question?
It looks like there are some more questions. I'm just looking here. There's a question here about, well, it's a comment first. Thank you, thank you, thank you for surviving and thriving. And what are some things that help bring you joy besides poetry?
Ooh, I am a junkie of joy. There is a bomba song that says, canto, yo vivo triste, cada día sufriendo más. Ay Dios, ¿qué será de mí? Si no bailo esta bomba, me voy a morir. Well, one of the things that I think is definitely dance. I love dancing. And dancing is a way, again, of connecting with the body in its utmost sacred materiality, and thinking that, you know, we are alive. And my kids, they bring me a lot of joy. I have a son and a daughter. My daughter is non-binary, and she's, you know, a géneros disidente. And I enjoy her day so much with the fight, you know, 16 years old, incredibly into politics, and it makes me so proud. And my oldest wants to do graphic novels. And to see all these stories that he's making in his head. And he's the one who took me into futurism, because he's always, you know, thinking into those worlds. So I love that. My students, which are my kids, they bring me so much joy. So they're so free, you know, and they survived one huge, they survived Maria when they were 13 or 15, terremotos and pandemia, and they are in the universities, you know, going at it and thinking and fighting and saving the university and marching and talking about deterritorialización and expropriation in Puerto Rico and against the law 2022. And they're the ones that are, you know, really fighting. And it just makes me so happy and just proud to be so close to them and to be alive at this particular moment. I could have been dead. Somebody could have, you know, sneezed next to me 2 years ago, and I could have been dead, and here I am. So I want to write all that because, you know, living in this wonderful island, so beautiful and so filled with calidez de la gente que se quiere, that makes me very joyful. And also another thing is that I'm very curious, and I'm very curious of where is this afro-latinidad is going to take us. I am very, very curious of that. I wish that two things happen. One of them is that we can get closer and really, really talk with our African American brothers and sisters, but talk. Not that they correct us because we're not Black enough. No, talk. Or that we say, no, we're not as Black as you, you know, because there's a lot of misunderstanding in those conversations, and we really need to make these conversations happen. And also I wonder if we could, you know, this thing about afrodescendencia, it's understood deeper, because afrodescendencia is not a color in your skin. Afrodescendencia is a political identification with this mixture of races and this oppression of races, and that is what it is. You know, I am not interested in the affirmation of Blackness if it doesn't take us to a post-racial world. To being Black is not enough. You know, we have to know that power always works in the same way, which is the control of power of bodies and resources. That's what it does. And it takes any form that it can get their hands into in order to screw people up for the benefit of a few. And I think that identity politics can be a very powerful way of combating that. But the affirmation of my identity by itself, it really doesn't make any sense to me. You know, I am so curious to know if we can make that connection with the African American community, really talk about this, stop the colorism thing that I am clearer than you and you're more Afro-descendant than me, because it's just nonsense. It makes me very angry, and not angry, impatient when I hear those discussions. But I think we have good things in our hand. I think we have an opportunity if we really think about the political implications of this identity politics and what Afro-Latino can do for the decolonizing of our narrative and the ways in which we identify ourselves. Enough with the Hispanic stuff. You know, and if we think about the Hispanic stuff, let's think about the real Hispanics, the Canary Islands, the people that were conversos that came down here. The ones that came were the ones that were useless for the crown. You know, they worked their privilege, but some of them escaped and joined the palenqueros and joined the quilomberos. And I want to, I want to face that opportunity too. So what are we talking about when we say Afro-descendant? And what is the importance of recognizing our Blackness, but also expanding it as a political model for the future and a change of narrative? So that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, here's a question from Liyun Alvarado. Gracias, maestra desde California. Oh, I want to hear more about the translation process. And did you connect with Mayra before, during, or only after the process?
We've been connecting for a while.
For a while. I started I'm a professor at CUNY, and so I was teaching, and Friday morning it was a semester that I was very, very busy teaching, and I thought to myself, I have to, although I do love my teaching and I think teaching can be very creative, but I needed a block of time. So every Friday morning I dedicated to, I needed something else that was not connected to teaching. So I started translating the poems on Friday mornings. I would translate 2 or 3 poems. I kept working through the collection. It was a rather long process because I hadn't set out initially to publish it as a collection of, as a full translation. I just started doing it on once a week. And then I joined a translation group, and on my translation group, every month I would take the poems that I'd been working on and I would read them out loud and we'd discuss them. And eventually Charlotte Whittle, who's the editor for Cardboard House Press, was in my translation group, and she started saying, I'm interested in this book. I'm interested in this book. And I thought, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can publish a translation of poetry. And I think that partly comes from just thinking about some of the things that Mayra's been saying. I mean, it partly comes from growing up bilingual, not feeling like either my Spanish or English are really good. Can I really do that? Are my language or my grasp of these 2 languages strong enough to be able to do it? And eventually there was such good reception and so much interest in the book that I said, yeah, let's go for it. And then I did get in touch with Mayra, and I published a few poems before I published the collection. And so we were in touch around those. When I was getting ready to publish them, we talked, and then we had long conversations about some aspects of the poems that I just, that I wanted to discuss, that was helpful to talk. It was just helpful to talk about them. So it wasn't so much like a word here, a word there, but rather, kind of a deep conversation of like what Mayra was trying to say with the work that then I went back and worked on.
And the thing about this was that it was like a comadre thing, but with a lot of bibliography, because when you read and you're a woman in the Caribbean, it's so weird because like it is hard for me to think of myself as an intellectual, con las perlas y el gato and talking and stuff like that. And so it was really cool because we could talk about shared readings. Like, espérate, pero tú, it's like what, like what
we talked about Glissant.
Exactly. But Edouard Glissant says about, that we Caribbeans think we have a prophetic vision of the past. See, now I'm talking, Laura, that's what I want to write about in futurism. that thing that Lisanne says, that we as people of the Caribbean and dispersed and all over the place, we have a prophetic vision of the past. What the hell is that? I think that is the tourism that we're talking about. And we would talk about things like that. Things that we have written or read. And did you think it's about, but as if we were, you know, drinking una medalla y comiéndose un pincho, and not this very stiff discussions, because, you know, you can drink a medalla and comerte un pincho y hablar de whisky a la misma vez, and in two languages, y que se jorobe. I'm sorry, I was going to be very boricua there, but I contained myself. Eso yo creo que fue lo más que a mí me gustó del proceso traductor, that we could talk, you know, very simple things, but very complex things at the same time, and without, sin esa arrogancia intelectual that sometimes makes me not right.
Yeah, but it was very helpful. I mean, to talk about these concepts and to have a sense of what you know, a better sense of what I thought Mayra was trying to convey with the work, that then I could go back and say, okay, let me figure out which words to use. But that was very helpful. And it wasn't the kind of line by line kind of thing. It was more the concepts, right? The concepts that we were
talking about.
Yeah.
Diana tiene aquí un comentario bellísimo. Yo no sé si nos estamos pasando de tiempo. What did Jose said that we had to be?
Oh, like now, probably. We probably have to wrap up now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mira, Diana Trejos, thank you for your commentary. You know, Diana said something very beautiful about el despertar de conciencia y materializar tantos aspectos por la cotidianidad, que la cotidianidad no les da importancia, ¿no sabes? And there was somebody, Margaret Shrimpton, who she's another boat people. She married a Yucateca and lives in Yucatan, you know, that is an Afro-Indigenous community. And Margaret always says that in our communities, in the Latino and the Afro-Latino communities and Indigenous communities, literature comes before history. That sometimes literature express what history hasn't said, because, you know, history is written by the ones who won. And so they say their version, but the other version, the other one is said by us. So we really have to be, you know, thinking about being more translations and more poetry and more novels and everything, because it is important to get that experience there. The historians are going to get there the last ones. Y es bien importante que le demos voz a nuestras cotidianidades. So thank you all.
Yeah, it's beautiful, a beautiful comment. We have one more comment, and then I was told I have one more minute. So I'm going to do this one last comment from Nicole Roberts, who says, when I think of the ancestors, I think in memory of those who chose the sea. My comment, Mayra, is this: those of us who live here have chosen the sea. May our healing continue through your words.
Oh, that touched my heart.
Yeah, it was very beautiful.
That is very beautiful. Yes.
So I think we're just about at time to wrap up. I want to thank you, Mayra. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you about your work. And thanks to our audience and to all of the sponsors, the co-sponsors who helped to organize this event and to get the word out about it. And I'm going to pass it off now to Yusef.
Pues gracias a todos. This was a phenomenal event, as always, when hearing from Mayra, as well as you, Vanessa. And thank you all for the work that you've done. And we just want to make sure that we invite everybody to our next event on Wednesday, October 18th. contextualizing absolutamente negro, negra, and negrex, will serve as an introduction to the conversation series, The Practice of Freedom, Absolutamente Negro, Absolutamente Black, which kicks off around the country in November and will explore why the conversation series is important now, why we still need to address the Blackness of Afro-Latinidad and Afro-descendants in Latin America and the Caribbean, and how we can continue to support anti-racist struggles throughout the region and beyond. Hosted by Janelle Martinez, with Dr. Marta Moreno Vega, Rafaela Uribe, Rosa Clemente, Jacqueline Martinez Carcel, and Josue Perea. This conversation series will provide a space for Afro-Latine and Afro-descendants from the Americas and the Caribbean to share their experiences and perspectives on race, representation, and power. It will also help to raise awareness of the challenges faced by Afro-descendientes in the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and promote anti-racist dialogue and action. I know that was a lot, but we hope that you all join us. You could get it, the link on our website, the afrolatinoforum.org. And we pray everybody has a blessed night. Thank you for coming.